Hello and welcome to Skynet Today's Last Week in AI podcast, where you can hear AI researchers chat about what's going on with AI. As usual, in this episode, we'll provide summaries and discussion of last week's most interesting AI news. You can also check out our Last Week in AI newsletter at lastweekend.ai for articles we did not cover in this episode. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Sharon Zhou.
And I'm your other host, Andrei Kurenkov. This week, we'll be talking about how Instagram is testing AI to verify your age and how some shops are using facial recognition to crack down on theft. We'll look at some research on training agents for Minecraft and using AI to detect autism. We'll talk about how Microsoft is eliminating face analysis tools, and Pentagon has released some new plans about AI ethics. And we'll talk about some fun tech around using Wordle with DALL-E.
All right, first up in our applications and business section is Instagram is testing an AI tool that verifies your age by scanning your face. So Instagram, if you don't know already, you have to be at least 13 years old to sign up for an account. But actually, until recently, Instagram didn't actually try to verify anyone's age. They just said that that was the age you need to be. Now they are including an AI tool that's built by Yoti, which is a third-party company, to verify or estimate how old you are by just scanning your face. And actually, even until 2019, Instagram never even asked new users about their birth date. So there was very, very little verification. But as you probably have seen and we've covered, Instagram has been, under a lot of scrutiny because of privacy, but also child safety in general. And so now they're trying to verify their users' age a little bit more carefully. And it was fun playing. Actually, you can actually play with the demo online, and Andre and I did, right?
Yeah, we pulled it up, this UOT thing, and at least for me, it eventually was pretty accurate. It guessed that I'm in the 28 to 32 range, and I'm 29, so that was accurate. Although I believe it didn't quite get the range right for you, Sharon, right?
Yes, it said I was younger, so I felt flattered. Maybe that was
But yeah, this is interesting. The article does say that right now Instagram asks users to verify their age only when teenagers try to edit their birth date to show them as 18 or older. And they could already send in pictures of various ID cards. But now users in the US can also ask for social vouching, which is asking mutual followers that are over 18 to confirm, or this AI estimation method. And apparently Yoti is a pretty well-known company in this space. It's been approved for use by the UK government and German digital regulators. And we do have some data as to how accurate it is. It doesn't perform perfectly as you might expect. It's not quite as good for certain skin tones. But when you look at age ranges of a few years, it does seem that it is very reliable at guessing whether someone is 18 or over or under 25, for instance. So, and that was from a third-party nonprofit analysis. So, it seems like overall, this seems like a well-chosen third-party tool.
And the data does say that, I guess, unsurprisingly, it is less accurate for female faces and people with darker skin. So that is something to note, as usual for AI these days. Instagram also uses another AI-powered tool to basically scan when users post about their birthdays. And if a user, claims to be, let's say, 20 years old, but says, they're celebrating their 17th birthday, then their account will be flagged as well. So there are myriad ways for Instagram to be verifying and checking and enforcing this rule.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's It's kind of, I don't fully understand this setup of like teenagers trying to edit their birthday. I guess if you set your birthday to something and change it, you then need to verify that for your account, which I'm not sure why that would even be a thing, but I guess people do it for whatever reason. So,
all right, I can speak to this. I've done this before.
Yeah.
You put in an age to make sure no one like blocks you from using certain site, and then you're like, oh, I actually want my real age on there, and then you.
I see. Then you change it later. So as a teenager, you would do something that's incorrect, but then change it once you turn 18 or whatever. Once it doesn't matter,
right? And sometimes you just don't know like what the age threshold is, or you didn't bother to look for it. So you're like, let me just make sure I'm, I don't know, of a certain age.
I do feel like the ID solution of just scanning a photo makes the most sense. But I guess this lowers the barrier or friction to doing that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And on to our second article, we have Bunnings, Kmart, and the good guys using facial recognition technology to crack down on theft. So these three store chains apparently have been using facial recognition from their CCTV footage to help avoid theft, according to this nonprofit Choice. So it's a consumer group, and it said that it surveyed 25 of Australia's largest retailers, and these three were using facial recognition technology, the others were not. And so, it's kind of interesting. Each one of these retailers does actually state that in their privacy policy, and it even has warnings up front in the store that say that there is a camera being used, and it has a warning like the store has 24-hour CCTV coverage, which includes facial recognition technology. So yes, it is at least very much stated, and it follows privacy regulations, but still this and other groups are, let's say, concerned about the ethics of this.
I think it's actually great that they put a sign up before entry, just to, make sure people actually know, because terms of service or, people don't often read those things. So they have that up front. Obviously, this still concerns a lot of people, where theft is involved. Cameras are already often in place for these things. But I guess as a counterpoint, the convenience store giant 7-Eleven actually last year disabled a feature in more than 700 of their tablets, which the OAIC, the Office of Australian Information Commissioner, found, there were facial images of millions of customers who didn't give consent. So consent is really important. And in this case, it is part of that process. I think it's a delicate balance. The article does note that the Human Rights Law Center is pretty concerned about whether this is okay to just use facial recognition, and it feels like a giant step. I think to counterbalance that point, it also is, like a lot of these stores see a lot of theft. So they're just putting in place like the next piece of that. So we'll see how this plays out. This is in Australia.
Yes. Yeah. The Office of the Australian Information Commissioner is actually being asked to review whether it is in accordance with the Privacy Act. So I guess it's really the store people who said it was, but maybe it's not. And yeah, I think this is a very logical application of facial recognition, but it'll be interesting to see if this basically holds up. I can see this easily being the case in a lot of US stores and really everywhere soon enough.
I could see. So I think during the pandemic, there was a lot of theft, especially in San Francisco. And I could see stores already did move away from the city. I could see stores choosing places where they're allowed to have certain types of technologies as well, which is interesting to think about as well.
Yeah, I do think there's been some statistics of petty theft, shoplifting being on a rise. So that is another reason for this, for sure. Yeah.
And on to our lightning round. We have a lightning round again. The first article is Cruise's driverless autonomous cars start giving rides to paying passengers. So the robotaxi perhaps is here. Cruise officially became the first company to offer paid, fared rides to the general public in a major city as of Wednesday, and specifically that's San Francisco. And initially, Cruise's driverless autonomous offering will operate only between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. and only on designated streets in the city. Definitely a very crowded time in the city. No, I'm kidding. But an important time because there are often drunk people and the like who are looking for rides and maybe not as much supply at those times. And then there are also, very big limits on where they can actually operate. So very, very interesting. This actually new operating window extends their total active time by 1.5 hours as compared to the free driverless test pilot that was offered previously last year. And so very similar to what they were offering for free. Would you try this, Andre?
I totally would. This is really exciting. And it's extra exciting that it's being done at night when the chances of a crash are incredibly low due to just there not being cars around. So yeah, still a slow rollout, but I'm super happy that finally we are seeing autonomous taxis, slowly but surely coming to be usable.
That's right. And only in designated streets. So arguably not sure what the autonomous means here. Yeah. Yeah. And our next article is Copilot, GitHub's AI-powered programming assistant, is now generally available. So previously, Copilot was just a technical preview, but they have now signaled that the tool would reach general availability. And so now they did announce it's available to all developers. It'll be free for students as well as, quote, verified open source contributors, starting with roughly 60,000 developers selected from that community and students in the GitHub education program. There's a 60-day free trial, then it's $10 a month or $100 a year per user. Would you pay for this, Andre?
I don't know. Right now, no, I don't code that much, but if I were to be a software engineer, I would definitely consider it, I think. What about you, Sharon?
I don't think I would. I think it was fun to use it, especially when my keyboard was kind of janky as butterfly keys for Mac. And so, but now, yeah, I don't think I would pay for it.
We'll see. Yeah, I think for like people who spend many hours a day coding, this could definitely make sense. And on to our other stories. IRS expands AI-powered bots to set up payment plans with taxpayers over the phone. So the U.S.'s Internal Revenue Service is handling more of its call volume through automation, which helps the call center employees have more time to address more complex queries. So you have to wait less to talk to a human, hopefully.
This is much less controversial than they're using facial recognition. So good job.
Yeah, good job. Everyone loves the idea of waiting less for being helped out for service. And next up, we have General Motors is using AI to speed up the vehicle inspection process. So GM has invested in the Israeli startup UVI, which makes vehicle diagnostic systems that use sensors and AI to quickly identify damaged parts or maintenance issues. So GM will now sell the technology to its dealer network and also work with UVI on other vehicle inspection technologies, hopefully making it cheaper and faster to do vehicle inspection for, I guess, GM car owners?
Yeah, for their cars. And for their car owners, yeah. And onto our research and advancement section. The first article is learning to play Minecraft with video PreTraining, or VPT. And this is a blog from OpenAI about their paper that was recently released. So they trained actually a neural network to play Minecraft. And what they did is they had a small amount of labeled contractor data. So they had contractors play actually 2,000 hours of video, and they would record the keyboard and mouse actions that they were doing, as well as the video frame. And they actually used an intermediate model trained on that contractor data to predict the actions that the contractor would take, to predict the keyboard, mouse movements they would do. And then they use that model to then give soft labels essentially to unlabeled videos of Minecraft. And that was 70,000 hours of just video out there on Minecraft. So it was that kind of two-stage approach, and using just the vast quantity of unlabeled data out there and just labeling it a little bit using a supervised model. Very cool work that now the AI model here is able to do what's seen as decently complex tasks in Minecraft, which includes, crafting a table, and you have to, go from the wooden log to a wooden plank to crafting a table. These are actions, that action specifically, I think, would take approximately 50 seconds or 1,000 consecutive game actions for a person who is very proficient in Minecraft. So it's cool to see that, the progress is being made in reinforcement learning. And you can imagine, from Minecraft, what other spaces are there, actions that are similar to this. I think there are a lot of actually simulation type things where we can be very general now. We can actually train these agents to be very, very general and do all of these, actions that before was much more constrained as a state space. So, very exciting stuff.
Yeah, I agree. It's really cool. And for me, what was most exciting is that, there's been work on Minecraft before, and some achievements like crafting with diamond axe. But here, the training is done over the native human interface of the keyboard and mouse. So there's no simplification for the AI. It's having to do exactly what a human would do, looking at the image, deciding on the key press and the mouse scrolling, which then means that this broad technique can be applied to maybe just about anything. I would imagine, like Photoshop editing or creating a PowerPoint, any software tool you're using. In theory, you could train to do this technique. Now, of course, the key result here is when you have a ton of data, which you can get from Minecraft, because there's a lot of YouTube videos of people playing Minecraft just themselves streaming. You can then learn this representation and do really well. So in some sense, that's also a bit of a limitation, that this doesn't help us with efficiency in any way. It helps us more so with showing that if you have a ton of data, you can do really well. But still, I think this was a really cool result, and it's really fun to see the trained agent doing stuff. So I think it's great to see OpenAI returning to doing some more reinforcement learning work, having really not done that for a bit of for a while. I think this is pretty exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And they actually are open sourcing the data and the model weights and the code. And so that's very, very exciting stuff. And they will have they're partnering with the MineRL NeurIPS competition this year. And so, you can enter that competition and work with that data and build even more difficult tasks in Minecraft.
Yeah, and actually a fun note, in the same week, this was last week, another paper called Mind Dojo, building open Another paper called Mind Dojo, Building Open-Ended Embodied Agents with Internet-Scale Knowledge, came out. So NVIDIA, primarily behind this, released this Mind Dojo, which is a framework built on Minecraft that features a simulation suite with thousands of diverse open-ended tasks. And again, they mined internet-scale knowledge of Minecraft videos and tutorials and Wikipedias. But instead of training an agent, the focus here is on creating thousands of possible tasks for the agent to do. So not just crafting a diamond pickaxe, but also exploring an ocean monument, scooping buckets of lava, fighting against an ender dragon, stuff like this. So it's kind of funny. These two go together so well, and they just happen to release almost at the same time.
Yeah, these will complement perfectly. I can imagine using this simulation environment to help with the other one and vice versa. So, yeah.
Indeed, yeah. And on to our second article. We have AI detects autism speech patterns across different languages. So this is about the paper Cross-Linguistic Patterns of Speech Prosodic Differences in Autism, a machine learning study. This was led by researchers at the Northwestern University in collaboration with researchers in Hong Kong. And the focus is to see if you can identify certain features of speech. So they focus on rhythm or intonation as the main sort of identifiers that kind of are the same for speakers, for children that speak either English or Cantonese, to be able to verify whether they are autistic or not. And using a fairly straightforward machine learning approach, they actually did verify that rhythm in particular, and these features related to rhythm, are common and do correlate for both English and Cantonese very strongly, which is a pretty great result for understanding autism and for being able to diagnose it. And for kind of building our understanding and helping to treat it better.
Yeah, it's very interesting that, one of the most prominent of these features is rhythm, and just to extract that as a linguistically agnostic feature is so interesting, because now, and one of the professors of this paper mentioned, now that, this means autism, is strongly influenced by some kind of genetic aspect and genetic, quote, liability to autism. And so I think that's super, super interesting because, it's not, it is genetic, and we have believed it to be genetic, but now this is kind of verified through this multilingual study.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is being able to differentiate to some extent the environment versus the genetic raise. And something that's interesting here is for these features, the speech rhythm here was done with some basically pre-built audio processing. So they had some pretty fancy logic that basically created different measures of rhythm from utterances. And then they used a very small machine learning model called an SVM to train a classifier to predict whether the speaker was autistic on the autistic spectrum, or where they were on a spectrum. So interesting that I guess this was such a cool result, but didn't actually make use of neural nets per se, or giant neural net. And I do wonder if more advanced techniques could then help even more in kind of follow-up research.
I think so. And this is really a start, because I'm sure it was a huge pain in getting the data for this. So now that they have the data, they can now apply more advanced techniques.
Yeah, that makes sense. This data here actually involved having young people reading or telling their own version of a story depicted in the picture book, Frog, Where Are You? So as you say, probably not too easy to get a bunch of kids and young adults to record audio, especially if they're autistic.
And on to our lightning round. First article is Meta releases largest open source AI language model to date. So Meta is actually now releasing OPT 66 billion, which is language model with 66 billion parameters. And this is following their other open source models, which are much, much smaller, several orders of magnitude smaller at 125 million. And well, one was 30 billion. So not actually that much smaller. They do have a non-open sourced one where you have to request it for 175 billion parameters. But this is now the largest open source AI language model that you can access without any restrictions, just from the GitHub page. And the next article is Google's Parti generator relies on 20 billion inputs to create photorealistic images. So Google just unveiled its Parti. Parti spelled with an I at the end, not a Y. And it's a text-to-image computer model, which makes hyper-realistic images by looking at billions of inputs. It's not releasing either Parti or Imagine, which was, a previous model that they did release doing this, to the public because they believe the AI data sets carry a risk for bias. Because the data sets are created by people, they definitely have some type of stereotype or misrepresent certain groups, specifically towards Western stereotypes, and has a bias towards that. So that's why Google doesn't want to release them.
Yeah. This was kind of fun news because I think Imogen just came out like 2 weeks ago and was like, oh, wow, compared to DALL-E 2. And then this came out super quickly after that and is also on that sort of level of DALL-E 2 and Imagine, and uses a slightly different technique that isn't the same as those other two. So,
it's different group within Google, I believe. It's definitely not competitive within Google, hopefully. We'll see. But, there are many different techniques to get to the same thing.
And our other stories here. First, new hybrid machine learning forecasts lake ecosystem responses to climate change. So several researchers have spent 5 years searching for a better way to forecast and manage Lake Geneva's ecological response to a threat of phosphorus pollution, which now also climate change needs to be taken account to. And so they have now developed a new machine learning way to do that. And our last story is Cerebra's Systems sets record for largest AI models ever trained on a single device. So Cerebra's Systems is a company that sells pretty much custom hardware for training AI models that are very different from kind of GPUs that people typically use. Basically, they're massive chips. And they showed that it's possible to train a 20 billion parameter model on a single system, basically on a single device, which is not at all possible with GPUs. You would need a collection of GPUs and do distributed training and so on. So quite an impressive result.
And this is really impressive. And they're trying to, quote, democratize access to these very large language models and be able to train, one of these models and set them up in minutes, train them on a single one of these CS2 systems. And their WSE2 is one of the largest, the largest processor ever built. It's 56 times larger than the largest GPU right now. So this is, very, very impressive. And I think actually a lot of systems people didn't think this was possible. So it's huge kudos to them for making this work. I did recently meet Andrew Feldman, who's the CEO and founder of Cerebras, and he's he's very impressive. He just defies what, people say something's impossible. He's like, no, I can do this. I love it.
Yeah. They have a very, very interesting approach, and they've been at it for many years and are valued now at billions of dollars, I'm pretty sure. So definitely very exciting to see their progress.
And on to our society and ethics section. The first article is Pentagon unveils plan to make responsible military AI more than just a buzzword. So this week, the DoD, Department of Defense, released a 47-page document that outlines the military's plan to implement responsible AI principles. And basically, prevent the world from turning into Terminator, is what the article actually says. So it outlined, the DoD actually did outline ethical goals, AI goals in 2020. And this week has, this document has much greater detail and basically talks about it beyond just wishful thinking. And it's much more concrete. They list proposed actions to promote that responsible AI across the department based on 6 foundational tenets. The first is responsible AI governance. Second is warfighter trust. The third is AI product and acquisition lifecycle. The fourth is requirements validation. The fifth is responsible AI ecosystem. And the last one is AI workforce. So they basically want to modernize governance structures and processes that allows for the department to responsibly use AI, which right now, it definitely is not up to that modernization. So yeah, it's very exciting that the DoD has spent this time really thinking through this, and I think it's very important that they do.
Yeah, and this 47-page document is available for anyone to peruse. It's called The Responsible Pathway to AI Development and Acceleration.
And so the goal of this, because they released it, is to earn the trust of the general public as well as of the service members and all the people who will be part of in using the AI technology or affected by the AI technology. And also specifically, the DoD did stress that they will maintain humans in the loop, where a human operator will still have final control of deciding when an AI system makes a decision and carries out an objective. Because there have been a lot of, rumblings around autonomous weapon systems and, killer robots that are completely autonomous. But here they're saying, no, we want human in the loop. We want to make sure people have the final say and final role in deciding what happens.
Yeah, exactly. So, this is a pretty good document to look through. Again, it's available to anyone. I looked through it a bit, and it does have a lot more details, which I guess should, at least to some extent, I think does merit what they're claiming, which is they're trying to pursue research and development of AI for military purposes ethically. So I guess that's might make you feel a little better that they're not trying to achieve a Terminator or some kind of like really problematic use of AI. I think being told that it's really the focus on the human in the loop approach does make me feel a little more comfortable, even though I think, regardless, inevitably the DoD will incorporate AI in all sorts of ways for warfare and that sort of thing.
The main thing that does concern me about the document is the fact that it looks like it was scanned in.
Yeah, this is kind of funny.
Yeah, so, talk about, modernizing would mean you don't need to print this out before you scan it in. You can just upload the PDF. But baby steps. So
yeah, the resolution of these images is kind of low. I don't know what this looks like, lower as JPEG. Anyway, yeah. So we'll have a link there if you want to take a look.
Yeah, perhaps it was to get a wet signature from Kathleen Hicks, who's the Deputy Secretary of Defense. So
In our next article, Microsoft plans to eliminate face analysis tool and push for responsible AI, some more ethics. So it said last week that some of its features, face analysis primarily, are being removed from its AI services. So they will stop being available to new users this week and will be phased out completely for existing users within a year. And the reason for this, according to them, is that they had a 2-year review, and a team at Microsoft that developed this responsible AI standard, a 27-page document that sets out requirements for AI systems. According to that, they decided to remove some of these services for, I think there was emotion prediction and gender prediction, age analysis, pretty much a lot of things having to do with facial analysis.
Not nearly as long as the DoD is 27 pages. Sorry, that is not how one should be measuring ethics.
It's still pretty long, 27 pages. That's a lot of details as to the requirements for systems to be good.
That's right. And, among the specifics of it, users are required to explain and apply, how they will actually be using potentially abusive AI systems, such as the custom neural voice. I remember they had this actually before this document has come out, when I've tried that before. So Microsoft is really thinking about this. And, I wonder if it's similar groups that are chatting with each other at the DoD and Microsoft about responsible AI.
Yeah, I'm sure, there are at least the people who are really thinking hard about these things are definitely reading the same kinds of things, right? And there's cross-pollination of ideas. But I think in general, this seems like a pretty good outcome. So they still do have a tool for face recognition, but can only be used, as you said, with a justification. You have to be screened to use it, basically. And other things like emotion prediction, which we've talked about before, are just kind of not useful enough or not reliable enough to be used by anyone, according to Microsoft.
And on to our lightning round. First article is Vitali Klitschko, fake, tricks Berlin mayor in video call. So the Berlin mayor actually spoke for 15 minutes with someone posing as Vitali Klitschko, who is the Kiev mayor. But, then after that happened, suspicion did arise that was a deep fake. Then, police were called to investigate. And apparently it most likely was, since the Berlin mayor said they did not speak with Klitschko. So, and our next article is China's surveillance state is growing. These documents reveal how. So the New York Times actually did an analysis of over 100,000 government bidding documents, and they found that China's ambition to collect digital and biological data from citizens is very, very expansive. They claim more expansive than previously known.
Which is impressive because it was already known to be very expensive. So, this is a long article, a lot of details, and it is, it's kind of shocking how thorough this effort is. So, if you do want to know more of the details, it's a pretty detailed investigation. On to our next articles. We have earthquake tech could limit deaths, but Afghanistan shows it's not easy. This is an interview with a researcher or some researchers that work on predicting earthquakes faster using AI. But it goes into how applying these techniques in, for instance, Afghanistan, which just recently had a major earthquake, is not easy if you don't have the infrastructure of seismic stations to record data from. So very promising for dealing with some disasters, but you do need to kind of work to prepare for that to be in place.
Yep. Moral of the story: you always need data.
You always need data. Yeah.
Data. Yeah.
And our last piece here is Alexa has a new voice, your dead relatives. So during a presentation at this week's Amazon Tech Summit, there was a little presentation of an Echo Dot, which is their device that has Alexa built in. There was a demo of it having a new feature still in development that allows the voice assistant to replicate people's voices from short audio clips. So if you have, let's say a grandma or someone, any real relative, you can give Alexa your clip and then hear this person kind of, I guess, telling you various things, like they gave an example of reading a bedtime story. So yeah, I think this generated quite a big response online. It seems fairly weird to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think, bedtime story is one thing, but then asking you to buy a certain type of Amazon product and persuading you to do so might be another. So something to think about. And onto our fun and neat section. Wordalle is a guess the prompt game that combines Wordle and DALL-E. So this is a fun little game that you can try online, where you get to look at the output of a DALL-E prompt. So there are 6 images and they look, typically weird. And then just like in the game Wordle, if you haven't heard of it, you guess how to describe those pictures, actually, in this case. And specifically, you're guessing the prompt that was put into DALL-E in the first place to generate those images. And I will say that Andre is much better at this game than I am. However, I did succeed at my second attempt to get it on the first try. And it was flag pancakes. And those pancakes with a lot of American flags on it. But Andre is the real champ here as a Wordle fan.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I played with it when it came out, and it's pretty fun. Yeah, you should give it a try. The concept itself is very amusing, and the idea is, you have to guess the prompt, and you get this feedback of which letters you got right or wrong. And they have it seems like a pretty good range of images. They have, things like Yoda on a yoga mat, or graffiti of noodles, dinosaurs, riding waves, stuff with Darth Vader, ninja mice, etc., etc. So fun to just see random DALL-E images and successfully guess the prompt. And also, I gotta say, the pun or the naming here is so good. Like, you take Wordle, you take DALL-E, and you get Wordalle. It's just beautiful.
Oh my God, I just got another one on the first try. Robot banana.
Nice.
All right.
Okay. And for our last fun article, we have the King's Swedish AI rewrites the book in Scandinavia. So this is a slightly serious article in that it is about how researchers in Sweden have developed their own large language model called GPT-SW3. And it was tasked with drafting the annual Christmas speech for the King of Sweden. And apparently it did a pretty good job. So, there was this fun little demonstration. I guess 2 the main people in power, the politicians who may not be so technically informed. And it was actually pretty impressive that for a small country and a core team of just 6 people, they could actually do this.
That's awesome. More countries, the better.
Yeah, and this will pave the way for a lot of, I guess, areas in Scandinavia to hopefully have these language models, which is one of the limits of our progress right now, is mostly there for English.
Right. And I will also say, they said, only a few people were needed. I think the biggest part is resources on the compute side. So having that supercomputer is very, very important. For sure, you also need the talent, but the supercomputer is very, very important. Probably potentially harder to get in some ways.
Yeah. And this version is 3.6 billion parameters. So it's still on its way towards the largest models. I guess that's why it's GPT SW3. I don't know. Anyway, neat story for sure.
And with that, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Skynet Today's Last Week in AI podcast. You can find the articles we discussed here today and subscribe to our weekly newsletter with similar ones at lastweekend.ai.
If you like the show, then please do share it with other people you know who might be into AI. And even give us a review on Apple Podcasts. We always love to hear your feedback.
We love the reviews.
But
absolutely,
we do love the reviews. Yeah, I check every time before we record if there's a new one. I really do. But even if you don't, please do just keep tuning in for future AI news coverage.
Woo!